Hey, Tiffany. How are you?
Hello. I'm good. How are you?
Doing great. Very excited to have you on, especially since we just released the Growth IQ video book this month.
So exciting.
Yes, and of course, hello to everyone that has attended. Thank you for joining our April Fireside chat. Just quickly wanted to introduce ourselves here. So I'm Ronak Sheth. I'm the founder and CEO of Lit Videobooks. I'm thrilled to be hosting what we know is going to be a really exciting and empowering conversation with Tiffani Bova around the 10 paths to scaling a successful business. A little bit about who we are, just really quick, if you don't know yet. Lit Video Books makes reading best-selling business and self-improvement books as enjoyable as watching a movie or a documentary with a new format that we hope you'll love, video books. So just stay tuned at the end of the chat if you'd like more information on how you can access our library, which has Growth IQ and many other video books. What to expect today. So we're going to learn a little bit about Tiffany's career journey, how she initially got started, how Tiffani helps businesses scale and grow, and specifically dig into a few of the paths you can take that she's identified as critical to growing a business. We're going to showcase a few video book clips from Growth IQ, so you could see firsthand how we brought these concepts to life on screen. And the last 15 minutes will be for Q&A. And so there's a Slido link that is in the chat. If you want to upvote any questions so we know what everyone wants to hear or add new ones, please do. Tiffani, our quick bio doesn't do justice, but let me go through some of your background. So Forbes has called you a thought leader who reshapes our perception of growth. You've been recognized as a top 50 thinker for the last 6 years, and your perspective has helped lead the tech industry through several evolutions. You've worked with some of the biggest names in tech, such as Salesforce, Amazon, AWS, and Microsoft. How did you get your start at having your finger on, the pulse of transformation in the tech industry?
Well, it was pure luck. I think I've been in and around tech now for 30 years. Whenever I say that out loud, I'm always like, might even be 32 now because yeah, quite a bit of time. But I started out as an individual quota carrying sales rep and sort of just worked my way up from a management standpoint across sales and then marketing and then customer service or customer success, always in technology. And then I got this crazy opportunity to join a company called Gartner as a research director, covering sales transformation and go to market and indirect channel strategies, which I had sort of been around, right? Like building them, working in them, advising internally, if you will. And that took me on a completely different journey over a couple of years. Then I really started to find my footing. And after a decade, I left Gartner as a research fellow and was lucky enough to land at Salesforce. They created a role for me to pretty much do what I was doing at Gartner, but do it for Salesforce's clients, which took me out of technology into completely different industries. And I found how applicable the things I had learned in tech and had been advising companies in tech was really something I could apply to hospitality or healthcare or education or fintech. And I really saw that there was some synergies between it. And that really led me to my first book, Growth IQ.
It's amazing. And so, yeah, this experience kind of led you to Growth IQ, which has been super valuable. Tell us more, if you can, about the impetus of writing the book and what kind of drove you to write Growth IQ.
I think it was a culmination of a couple of things. One, I think the fact that I was a practitioner, right? I was someone who sold, who was responsible for driving leads from a marketing perspective and what that looked like. And by the way, very early in this thing called the World Wide Web, I was a Loqua's beta client. I was Constant Contact's beta client, one of them. So I was selling virtually via chat and a recurring revenue model in early 2000s. So that gave me sort of a front row seat to where I thought the market was going to be going. And then when I landed at Gartner and saw companies moving from on-premise solutions to cloud-based solutions as clients, but then also as providers and vendors, shifting entire parts of their business from hardware to software, from hardware and software to services, to moving all that to the cloud, and how disruptive that was to the way in which they sold, compensated their salespeople, went to market, engaged with clients, who those clients actually were. I started to see patterns, and I found myself answering similar questions sort of all the time. Like, it's getting harder to grow. What is it we should be doing right now or in this quarter that can help us recover? It could be, marketing dollars are not going as far as they used to. We're not getting the return on those investments, or the CAC, right? The cost to acquire a customer is going up. We're not getting more efficient. And then we find ourselves cutting costs as a way to drive growth when things start to get hard. And so I sort of felt like it can't only be those three, right? We can't just say you have to hire more salespeople, spend more marketing dollars, or cut costs as a way to growth. There has to be more ways. And so I started to pay attention to what was being asked and what was I advising. And it really lent itself to this, fell into, if you will, a handful of buckets, which really was the start of the 10 paths to growth. I didn't start out with, I think it's 10. It was sort of 3 or 4. And then it was, well, no, 5 or 6. And then it was sort of, well, wait, it's 7 or 8. And I didn't want it to get so crazy on how many. And so I really started to force myself to think, how can I put them into a more manageable framework? And then that really led me to the 10 paths to growth.
That's amazing. Yeah, I think every business goes through a phase where they're thinking about these questions. So I really appreciate you creating this amazing book. And now it's a video book. So we're excited to share it with everyone here. We know not everyone has had a chance to watch the video book, so we wanted to go ahead and share a sneak peek. So we're going to play a short clip from the introduction of the video book.
Amazing. Many business leaders have what I call the crisis of prioritization. I can't do everything at one time. I don't have enough time to make the right investments in the business. So you're going to have to pull back on something to give yourself some time. Where are you going to place your bets? And if you place that bet and it's not working, then you have to be willing to say, hold on, is it not working because it's the wrong strategy? Maybe it's the wrong approach, the right pricing, right partnership, wrong partnership. Could be a lot of reasons. This is where Growth IQ can really help you analyze where to place those bets, how to analyze what it is you're trying to do, and then reassess, and then move on.
Wonderful. So Tiffani, you've advised companies of all sizes in so many different industries, and at different points in their business and growth trajectories. When you start working with a company, do your processes and advice, depend on the client's industry, their size, their stage, what they're trying to accomplish, or does your approach kind of stay relatively similar, regardless of kind of the company's characteristics?
It's a great question, because I think it says also something about my own personal journey. When I started out as an analyst, as I mentioned, I was a practitioner. I didn't have that sort of academia analytical mind, if you will, in the way to respond to questions from clients and or even frame what my answer may be. So normally, like, I would say, oh, well, if someone asked and they were outside of technology, or maybe it was a software company or a startup versus a mid-size or enterprise or even global, 500 company, would I answer the same way? And the answer was, I would just sort of go, yep, I know the answer. Here it is. Boom. And then I realized about year 3 that I was probably doing a disservice. That let me just stop for a second. Let me pause and let me start to ask questions back before I answer right away. And when that shift happened in my own personal development, as an analyst and as an advisor, the knowledge really opened up, because it it led me to start to see those commonalities regardless of industry or size. So I would say something like, okay, first, tell me what growth strategies are working now for you. Now, I might not use those words, right? Like, what are you doing to sell today, right? It might be something very tactical, but at its highest level, it was, what are you doing today that is working in growing your business? Okay, great. How has the performance of whatever that was been over the last 12, 18, 24 months? If they've only been doing it for 6, tell me how that progress has gone. Do we start to see diminishing returns in those investments? When did that diminishing return start? Was it a year ago that they were growing at, let's say, 15%, and then it was 14 and 13 and 8 and 7 and 5, and now all of a sudden they're asking me, uh-oh, right? We're at 3% growth. It's been consistently going down over time. I would then say, well, that signal showed itself, right? A year or 18 months ago or 6 months ago. Did you do anything to course correct? And they may say, yep, we did this, this, and this. And so it starts to uncover, one, what they're already doing that's working. Two, what they're doing that used to be working that may no longer be working. Three, what have they tried over that period of time that either worked or didn't work? And then what did they continue to tweak, if you will, right? Adjust ever so slightly in order to see if they could course correct if something was going wrong, or accelerate even further if things were going right. Once they gave me that information, then it was like, okay, now I can start to say, here's where I think we have opportunity for improvement across those 10 growth paths, if you will. But that question back is something maybe even you consider, right? What are you doing now? What's working? What's not working? What were you doing that's working, that's no longer working? Because the market has changed, customers' demands and expectations have changed, your own organization has changed, right? Obviously, we can talk about pre and post COVID and how that has really disrupted a lot of industries, supply chains, access to manufacturing and goods, whatever it is. If you could outline what that looks like, that's where the work really has to begin. But sometimes leaders don't know the answers to those questions. They're just stuck, if you will, in the current, and they don't have the ability to look back and see what got them there. So that's where, regardless of industry, sector, size, region, I can start to understand their business more clearly.
That's super valuable. Yeah, I think as a CEO, I think we're always trying to move so quickly that we rarely have the time to stop and kind of think through and analyze deeply what have we been doing. And so what you're suggesting makes a ton of sense. And I think it sounds like really deep discovery should be a very important process of thinking about and enhancing growth, and before we even kind of get to the growth paths, right? So that's really helpful. Thank you. And one thing you open up the video book with is what you call the crisis of prioritization for leaders. Let's expand a little bit on that. So what are kind of the first inklings that you see that a leader can use to signal, yeah, I need to take a step back and reassess what we're prioritizing and focused on here?
Sometimes it's as basic as there are no priorities. Like, sometimes, right? Not all the time. Sometimes there may be no priorities. Sometimes there may be like 5 first priorities. And so that crisis of prioritization sometimes is we don't really have any. It's just sort of whatever works, go and do, because we are just running as fast and hard as we can to grow the business. Another time, it may be we have 3, 4, 5 different priorities. And so as an individual contributor, where am I supposed to focus my time? Because if I'm not focused, nothing is getting done really well. So if we're talking about growth, right, I have a priority to hire salespeople, retrain or reskill the ones that I already have, deploy and implement a new CRM tool, institute new pricing and discounting structures, and then optimize the sales process or funnel by which leads come in the business. I have to do those 5 things. And for anybody who's listening, who's a seller, you're sales leader, you're like, yep, sounds like my day, right? I have to do those things. But where are you going to prioritize? Where are you going to say, this is where I have to spend my time? And the smaller your organization is, the challenge is that that one individual literally has to do all 5 of those things. As you get larger, the leader can have the opportunity to maybe stand up a sales operations team or a sales ops team. And when I say a team, it could be a person, right? But maybe they can start to focus on the sales processes. And then you may say, look, we have to get IT. Either we hire someone from an IT perspective or we bring in a partner to help us deploy the CRM tool. And as a matter of fact, let's just start with an off the shelf version and not customize it all so that we can get this up and running really quickly. And now that project has moved over to IT, still being involved, obviously, but now you can start to peel things away and really focus on the priority of your own individual selling teams. Like, what are they doing? What's working? What's not working, right? Do they need to be reskilled, retrained? Are they using the technology? Now you can focus on individual development of your people, whatever it is. The point is that you can't focus on 5 things. Now, it is possible, a little caveat there, it is possible if you're super diligent and um, determined and disciplined on your time management, where you may say, okay, I am going to block my calendar to do these things throughout the week, that I'm not in 75 meetings and I have no time to do my job, but after hours or on weekends, which is not sustainable. So if you're super disciplined on your calendar, maybe you can pull those things off. But it is really about uncovering what is the priority, and as a leader, how can you make sure your people individually know where they should be focused throughout the day, what's going to have the greatest impact, and start to, here's a crazy thing, remove things from the priority list that no longer are important to the business. And once you get rid of them, it frees you up to do the things that are going to have more impact. So that crisis of prioritization has a lot of legs to it, right? It's time management, it's discipline, it's bringing on people with expertise you may not have, it's focusing on the greatest impact, highest impact items, which means you need to know what those are, and being really good as a leader in being empathetic and transparent with everybody that, hey, this is going to be challenging until we can get into a better rhythm, and then start to set those priorities and stay focused on them. You can't change priorities every week. It just signals to the team that they can't ever get a rhythm themselves.
Yeah, that's all definitely super relevant. Here at Lit, we're also growing our enterprise business, right? So this advice is super valuable. So if I'm a leader at a small business or a manager at a larger business, and I realize, hey, we have some growth issues, we have growth problems. Where do we start? What teams or people inside the company should be involved? What are the first steps, a company should take when we've identified what our growth problems are?
So, look, once again, it depends how large your organization is, right? If you've got 30 people in your company and you have 2 salespeople, like that's a very different conversation than you have a couple hundred people and you have 25 or 30 people in your selling organization and you have some sort of heft to your structure, meaning like you may have sales ops, you may have your sellers segmented into sales development reps, or selling into net new customers, or selling into the basic customers, right? So I want to put that always as, if you're listening to this and you're small and you hear me talking, I don't want you thinking, oh, this information is only for large companies, because I try to make sure that regardless of where you are in your journey, there's some value there. But what I'd say is, once you understand where you are focused today and what growth initiatives you're doing and what's working and not working, which is where we started this conversation, that's where you have to start to place your bets. You are going to have to focus on, what is the growth path I'm going to go after? So for example, right, is it, I want to improve customer experience. Okay, that's a growth path, right? I want to optimize the way I sell. Okay, that's a growth path. I want to sell more to my existing base of customers. Okay, that's a growth path. I picked those 3 as an example because those 3 are a constant. Like, they always should be a focus for your organization. It's the others that sort of might come in and out. I'm going to launch a new product, or I'm going to go into a new market, or I'm going to establish partnerships, or whatever it might be. But those 3 are always critical. And so I'd say, how do you make sure that you have a strong experience for your customers? 2, are you optimized in what you're asking of your sellers to do? Are you optimizing what you're asking your customers to do in order to do that wonderful thing of sell something, buy something, right? Like the exchange of products and goods for revenue. And then next, are you taking care of the customers you already have? If you just started there and you didn't do anything else, I'd bet you'd start to see improvement. It may be improvement in losing customers, maybe declining. It may be that your salespeople have more time to do what you hired them to do, which is sell. And then, you're taking care of that base of customers and potentially upselling or cross-selling them other products and services that you have. That alone will give you growth. So it may sound really basic, and it is, but sometimes companies will overcomplicate the act and art of driving revenue and driving growth. If you don't get those basics right, the foundation of the house, of the business, it's really, really more challenging to start to put anything more on top of it. It will sort of crush under the weight of your inefficiencies if you don't get the basics right.
That's great. Yeah, thank you for sharing those three. And there's many more in the book. We're excited to share it in this next clip. So there are 10 fantastic growth paths that you have set up in Growth IQ. And the three that you say that are kind of absolutely essential, we're excited to share a little bit more about that here in this upcoming clip.
Customer experience, customer base penetration, and optimized sales. Those three are always present because you want to make sure that the customer obviously is happy. You're taking care of your existing base of customers, but you are actually selling in a way that allows you to attract new customers, maintain existing ones, and do it in a profitable way.
The first of these paths is customer experience.
How you sell is important, but how your customers feel when they engage with your company, online, with a person, with a field service person, with a call center rep, whomever it is, we believed that that experience was going to really, really matter.
The next core growth path is customer base penetration.
I often say, in the gold rush of everyone coming to the West a long time ago, did the gold miners find gold in a mountain and say, "That's fantastic, now let's go find another mountain"? No, they said, let's mine this mountain. That's what businesses forget, the gold they already have.
Another growth path we should always be utilizing is optimizing sales. When Bova advised customers with slowing sales, she often heard three things:
spend more marketing dollars, hire more salespeople, cut costs. Those were kind of the three things I'd hear. And I'd be like, that can't be the only way you fix the fact you have a sales problem. And I'd say, well, hold on a second. Let's just talk about how effective your existing sellers are today.
Salespeople are estimated to only spend about a third of their time actually selling.
But if you gave them 10% time back by optimizing the way that they sell, you most definitely will get some lift in quota attainment.
Wonderful. Yeah. So customer experience, customer base penetration, and optimizing, the sales process. Could you share a bit about what you see when you're brought in to help companies who are struggling and maybe falling short in these three key areas?
Well, it gets, how do I say this? It's a delicate dance, right? Because you don't want to completely deflate, an individual or a team or an organization on what they're doing is just not working. So we have to make sure that we find things that are bright spots, right, in all that's happening. So looking across, I will ask, okay, map out for me your current sales process as an example, right? Like if we're in person, right, get up on the whiteboard, just map it out. Is it 3 steps in the sales process? Is it 5? Is it 8? Is it 10? You'd be surprised. Some are like 10 steps. And I'm always like, look, your customers don't wake up in the morning and go, I'm so excited. I'm going from stage 3 to stage 4 in the sales process. Like they don't say that. Like it's very much an internal thing, but let's map out the sales process. And then let's just look at that and say, well, do we need 8? Could we do it in 5? What's the purpose of 8? Or what's the purpose of 5? Like, what are the reasons you have these sales processes? And a lot of times it's something like, well, we want to know if the deals are moving forward. We want to get better visibility into our pipeline. We want to make sure we have greater forecast accuracy, like those kinds of terms, right? Or goals, if you will. And so that's where you can start to have this very rich dialogue, because could you automate things? Technology now is so much more advanced. Could you take some of that off the plate of the seller? As I said in my lit book, right? The conversation there was they only spend 28, sellers only spend about 28% of their time selling. So if you could give them 10% back, my gut tells me, in sort of back of the envelope math, as I like to say, that quota attainment's going to go up if you give them more time to sell. So look at the process and see if you can drive some of the inefficiencies out of that. Then do the same on the customer side. Is there 10 things they need to do before they buy from you? How do you get to 2 or 3, which tends to be the right sweet spot? So, getting people to start to look from, I don't want to introduce new thinking here, but that sort of approach it from a design thinking perspective, that designing processes, aligning people and systems, and that customer and seller interaction to make it frictionless and seamless, which we toss around those terms very freely, but that's a great way to do it, right? So to your question, right, map out what they're doing. And then secondarily, what are you doing into your base of customers today? Look, if you have one product, then you don't have other things to sell to your customers. And you could maybe increase the recency they buy, or the frequency that they buy, or how many they buy, even if you only have one thing. If you have more than one thing, it allows you that freedom to sell across it. The marketing is an area that, we could spend a lot of time talking about, but a lot of the inefficiency is that you're over analyzing every little step in that sort of funnel without getting to what is the human interaction, whether it's digital and human, digital and digital, human to human. Like, what does it look like, and how can we use technology to be smarter about it? Look, there is no one easy answer. If you're listening to this or you're going to watch the lit book, I'm not going to give you the single answer. The one thing about growth is it's never one thing, and it's different for everybody. But if you start to do some of these basic steps, even if you're a very seasoned leader or a larger organization, I guarantee you will find places to make improvements.
Absolutely. And one of the frameworks that you mention in, the book and the video book, I think could be really helpful for viewers, context, combination, and sequence. So could you share more about this framework, and, how does this framework help your thinking and guidance around growth?
Yeah. So context for me is almost what I was describing when I said, when I first started out being an analyst, someone would ask me a question, I would just answer. Context is, hold on, let's make sure we understand who is our customer, what's happening in our greater market set or in our region, in our industry. What is our company actually capable of delivering by what time, right? Context is really deep understanding of your business. And by the way, context is always shifting. So you have to make sure you stay on top of that context. If you're in a industry that's being highly disrupted right now, then you may want to do monthly check-ins or quarterly check-ins to go, okay, what's changed externally? What's changed internally? And does that force us to make different decisions? So that's kind of context, right? Knowing what's going on in the market, in your business, with your people, with your systems, kind of everything. Combination is the fact that it'll never be one growth path. Like I said, those 3 we've talked about: customer experience, optimize the way you sell, and customer base penetration. The combination of those 3 is always there. And so it's never one growth path in isolation. So if you're going to optimize the way you sell, it will have implications into that experience and into how you treat your existing customers. And so therein lies the fact that you are just not going to ever have one growth path. Now, if you're doing 2 or 3 other growth paths and now you want to kind of prioritize one, I get that, but it's always in combination with others. So that's combination. Now, sequence, that was the secret sauce. I went into writing Growth IQ, kind of came up with the 10 growth paths. I understood context. I knew it would never be one growth path, but I was surprised to sort of uncover this concept of sequence. And let me explain what I mean there. The order in which you do things has meaningful and measurable impact on its success. So sequence is the order. So which priority do you do first, second, third should be based on the context and what growth paths you're following. So, if you were to go into a new market, do you just sell directly on your own and hire salespeople? Or do you say, I want to set up distribution first or partnership channels first? And then ultimately that changes the sequence in which you do things. Like you say, you know what, before we go into this market, I'm going to stand up distribution channels and customer service call centers because it's out of our time zone. And then I'll hire my salespeople and then I'll launch in the region. Like that's an example, if you will, of sequence. And so those three things, context, combination, and sequence, are absolutely where you start. And then you start to decide which paths you want to take, always looking back at context and making sure you're not combining like all 10. Like, well, if I just combine all 10, won't it work? No. It'll work, I guess, right? But, it will be very challenging for your people to keep track of. But that sequence is that secret sauce. That is what you can't replicate. So if you're in an industry and you have a company that is really just exceeding expectations, and you're like, let's just do exactly what they're doing. You don't have their culture. You don't have their customers. You don't have their employees, right? You don't have their innovation engine. So the context is not the same. You may not know what they're combining in those growth paths. And you most definitely may not know the sequence in which they do things. You're only seeing it from the other side of the glass, right? Looking back in and going, I see success. So what I think they're doing, let's just replicate that. It's very difficult to replicate someone else's recipe, if you will, because there's those little subtleties that you can't see.
Right, that the secret ingredients, right, that are only relevant to your to your company. Amazing.
Yeah,
And one example that you
go ahead.
Yeah, no, one example that you mentioned in the book is kind of like that could be a gold rush for the company is customer base penetration. And so I kind of wanted to drill deeper into that, especially when people see that growth channels are becoming more expensive. What are some creative ways you've seen companies implement this idea of mining their existing customer base, and how do leaders put practices into place to execute this growth path of mining existing customer content?
Yeah, and this is sort of this age-old problem. The smaller your selling organization is, what ends up happening is you prioritize net new logos, net new customer, net new customer, net new customer, net new customer, right? It's just kind of all about go get new customers, go get new customers. And to my example, you forget about that gold you already have. Like you've already spent all this money to acquire these customers. They've already made a decision for you, your products, your service, your brand. They trust you enough to give you some money for some service or product. Why are you ignoring them? Instead, you're out trying to convince someone else we're the right product and service, trust us, right? Come and can buy what we sell, versus saying, hold on a second, should we not only sell to net new customers, but make sure we're paying attention to our base? Now, if you only have 2 salespeople, that gets difficult. Do you have one focused on net new and one focused on the base? Maybe. If you have 5, do you do 4 and 1 or 3 and 2? Or do you say our actual sales people are out getting net new customers? Our customer service support or customer success organization is going to take care of our existing customers. Somehow you have to think about, how am I going to organize, right? Going back to that optimized selling, because growth doesn't only happen from salespeople. It doesn't only happen from marketers who may drive, people to your website, and then commerce happens online. It's not just from marketing. And that it's not just from customer service, upselling, cross-selling, or even saving customers who may have wanted to call and cancel. It's all of them. And a lot of times leaders only focus on the sales team, or if it's a digital online business, they only focus on marketing and they forget about customer service, customer success as sort of its next revenue generation engine or its next sales organization. I don't want to turn customer service agents into sellers, but I don't want to turn customer service agents only into problem solvers. Right? Like it has to be a balance between the two. So as you get larger, you are able to start to delineate between what are the roles, who's doing what, who's focusing on net new, who's focusing on existing. And then you have this wonderful ability to say, okay, let's go back to the beginning. What's working? What's not working? Wow, we're seeing a lot of growth in our current base of customers. Let's take some of our net new acquisition money and resources and time and refocus to the base of customers as your base gets larger and larger and larger and larger. I often say, if you could sell one more thing to every customer you currently have, would you grow? Would you grow? I'm going to guess the answer is probably yes. And the smaller you are, you may not grow very much. But the larger you are, you're like, look, if I have 1,000 customers and everybody bought one more thing for me this quarter and sales was out doing their thing, I bet you'd have a really good quarter. So, ultimately, we want to make sure that you're balancing the two, that you're not only focused on one of them or the other. You have to be focused on both. And the smaller you are, the harder that is. The larger you are, the more disciplined you need to be.
Amazing. And we wanted to kind of showcase two studies that were present, in the book about Starbucks and Netflix, one which went well and one not so well. So we're going to go ahead and play another clip here from the video book.
Excellent.
While market acceleration is selling the same product in a different market, product expansion is selling a different product to the market you already have.
For example, if you sell something and that something needs batteries, should you also sell batteries?
But we need to be careful. More products are not necessarily better.
An example I often use in this is Starbucks. There was a point in time there where Starbucks started selling all kinds of things that were way outside of coffee. Not coffee mugs or to-go cups, but it was like CDs and teddy bears and games. It was very confusing as to, wait a second, where am I? And why are you giving me all these things? If you diversify too far beyond what your core products are, it will confuse your customers.
Oftentimes, a good approach is the 1+ strategy.
Meaning, if you can start with one product and really understand that market, and then it may grow from there, and you may eliminate that first original product.
Netflix is a prime example.
Netflix's original product was mailing DVDs, and then it was streaming. Well, now they've stopped mailing DVDs, even though it was their original product, and it helped build their entire empire in business. Sometimes you will get rid of something so you can focus on where the market has gone because the customer needs and desires have changed.
In Starbucks and Netflix too, I guess incredible success stories. For Netflix, they're such a giant now. We kind of forget how the company looked when it started and sending, DVDs by mail. What do you think Netflix has done right in their growth to date? And are there lessons that, other companies that may be smaller can take from their growth to implement, in their own practices?
Oh, well, there's so many. I mean, and there's really kind of, I really focused on one in the book. And one thing about Growth IQ is I didn't give a history lesson on Netflix as an example. I picked a moment in time to show how it relates to a particular path. So each chapter had two positive use cases of that particular growth path and one cautionary tale, that was discussed. So from a Netflix perspective, what I was honing in on that particular story was sequence. That if Netflix had started with streaming and not mailing DVDs in the US, would it have been successful? My assumption is probably not. And the reason why was because people in their homes still had either VHS players or DVD players, but they didn't necessarily have high-speed internet. They might have had dial-up internet, but you couldn't necessarily stream at that time. I think they knew that that's where it was going. And so did Blockbuster, by the way. Blockbuster had tried to do streaming years before Netflix ever introduced it, but it wasn't the right time. So Netflix, starting with DVDs, was we are going to disrupt the model that was prevalent at the time, which was I'm going to drive to a location. I am going to rent a VHS tape or DVD and hope that it's available. And if there's only 5 versions and they're out, I don't get it. I have to find something else. And if I don't return it in time, I get massive late fees. And so I'm going to impact that challenge for a user, similar to what Uber did to taxis. Very similar. Same model, same job, mix up how it's being delivered and how it's being done. And so if they'd started with streaming, it wouldn't have worked. But what they then did was said, okay, we're going to go from DVD. VHS started to go to the wayside. They had a huge leg up on DVD. Now, what did they know? They knew all those customers. They knew what they were watching. They had all this data and information about what they were ordering, how often they were ordering, when they were ordering, at what kinds of movies. They had all this information. And then they said, well, now that the internet is starting to become more prevalent and people are getting higher and higher speed access to data in their homes, let's start to shift this to streaming. And then it was a slow burn. And, in end of 2023, they finally stopped their DVD business, years out. And they were still, by the way, like 700,000 customers were still doing mail DVDs up until that point. So it's not like people weren't doing it. They were, but they had the, sort of foresight to say, we need to kill that because it's distracting and let's focus in on streaming. But then once they knew people were willing to consume that way, very similar to what Amazon did, books. I know all this information. Well, what if we start introducing other things? And we know these customers and we can start. Netflix did the same thing, right? They stayed close to entertainment. Well, what if we started sharing TV shows? Okay, what if we started creating our own content, right? Well, what if we get into podcasts? What if we get into books? What if we get, right? All of a sudden, they can start to build from the core. And so that is being really mindful of context, selling into your basic customers, upselling and cross-selling, introducing new products and services, which is another growth path, and accelerating your market growth and moving into new markets, also 2 other growth paths. So they followed it pretty quickly, over time. But I'd say to you, they understood the job to be done. They understood the context. They understood the sequencing, and they were masterful at doing it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it takes a lot of courage to disrupt your core business. And so, overall, just wanted to thank you, Tiffani, for sharing, all these wonderful insights and sharing, your advice and your process with us. I hope everyone can take something away, whether, you're one person at a small company or you own your business or you're, a sales leader at a large company. Before we jump into Q&A, just one final question for you from me. What is the one piece of advice you would offer to attendees to walk away with today?
Besides the one thing is it's never one thing. Besides that, I'd say this. I'd say really do a deep inventory on your current business to understand that context really well. The answers for your business, for your growth path, for your success lies within your business. It's not something I'm going to say or some book or some other book or some podcast, right? Or some conversation that will spark you to go, let me see how we are doing that, right? So you have to actually make a commitment that you are going to understand the context of your business and then take the information you hear from my lit book and others, right? To say, how does that apply to now that I understand the context of my business better? How does that apply to me? And how can I test some things, see what works, but more importantly, really hone in on what you can eliminate. There's no way you can keep adding to the plate without taking things away. So take some things away to free up your people to spend time on things that are going to have a greater impact, also bring them more joy, and deliver better user experiences to your customers.
That's incredible. Thanks again, Tiffani. We have a lot of questions here, so I'm going to do my best to kind of sort through them. So one of the first ones, in terms of employees who resist growth as being quote unquote sales, what are some strategies you would offer to build a growth mindset so more employees embrace growth?
Look, I think that so my answer might be the following: 10 paths to growth. The path I missed in the 10 was employees. So I had to write a second book. So to really cover that, I'm not going to cover that now. But what I'd say to you is that really understanding their engagement, their satisfaction, what motivates them, where there's opportunity for improvement. They want to see what they do every day and how that plays a part in the overall success of the organization. If you can tie those two things together, that what you do every day matters, and it matters in these ways, and also this is what you do every day, and this is how it impacts sales. This is what you do every day. This is how it impacts the customer. This is what you do every day, and that's how it impacts revenue and maybe even profitability. Then all of a sudden they go, now I get it. While I may not have sales on my title, I understand that I'm in legal or I'm in finance and how it plays a part in our ability to be successful, or I'm on product management or product design or service delivery or customer success. They have to be able to see and understand how what they do every day impacts each other so they can collaborate better, the customer so that they make different decisions, and then the health and profitability of the organization. If you can do those things, the purpose increases, their understanding and commitment increases, their satisfaction increases. And if you start to get more engaged employees, you get happier customers, you get that right, you get greater growth.
Thank you. So one topic that I think is very much in public discourse and is on everyone's minds today, AI. So how would you think about AI kind of being helpful for, some of the different growth paths that you mentioned in the book? And are any recommendations on, AI applications or approaches that you like and would recommend to growth leaders?
Sure. I think that there is varying degrees of opinion of how disruptive AI will be in certain jobs. I feel like AI is perfect to automate and scale tasks, but there are probably a much lower number where AI will just flat out replace a job. I do believe it will replace tasks. So if your salespeople are only spending 28% of their time selling and you want to give them 10% more time, AI and automation is a great way to do that. Do they need to, do these 5 manual steps, or can we have AI automate it? Can we have AI look for the customers that are more likely to buy again and give that to the seller so that they're more efficient and effective with their time, or give it to customer success? Could AI look for broken processes? Could AI look for ways in which they could streamline the buyer journey? Use AI because it is able to take massive amounts of data, look for patterns and signals. And then as humans, you have to validate it, right? You can't just say, AI told us to do this, that's what we're going to do. Use it as your sort of partner, right? Use it as your teammate. Use it as someone else sitting at the table, analyzing the context of your business, especially as you get larger, because more and more data is harder and harder for humans to navigate through and look for those patterns and signals. So I'd say embrace what AI brings to the business, and leverage it where it will give time back to your people, help them stop doing repetitive and mundane tasks, which everyone has heard for a really long time. You might be, yeah. But if you don't understand how much time your people are spending on certain tasks, how could you ever automate it? And that goes back to what I said. You have to absolutely be disciplined and willing to do a deep dive and be an anthropologist in your own business, right? Understand what's happening so you can look for areas by which technology, all up, not just AI, can improve the business.
That is super helpful. I love the idea of AI kind of being a companion to help you be able to sell more, right? And open up more of your time away from a lot of the mindless tasks that can take up, a salesperson's day to day. So thank you for that. Which paths do you find work best for new startups as opposed to established companies?
Look, the decisions you make as a startup will scale with you. So if you make the wrong decisions, if you will, early in your growth trajectory, it may impact you that when you get to a certain size, all of a sudden it's unmanageable and you have to go back and fix it. So that's why that constant context reframe, that optimizing, especially on the sales side, is really, really important. That if you have one sales leader and there's 4 steps, and a new sales leader comes in and adds 2 steps, now there's 6 steps, and then someone comes in and says, well, we're going to add 2 more, now it's 8 steps, and then all of a sudden you're like, how did we get to 10 steps in the sales process? It's because somebody wasn't watching. And so change management is sort of a skill set or a role or a person that as you're growing, someone is watching to make sure you're not overcomplicating and overburdening the business, that you're trying to keep it as streamlined and as focused and as frictionless as possible. So when you start to accelerate, those bad habits, those broken processes, those inefficiencies, those lack of integration between technologies doesn't actually hinder your ability to be successful. So if you're small, I believe you have an advantage over those that are larger, right? And have heavily sort of, their MarTech stack or their marketing technology stack is really bloated and they're having to fix things, where if you're really streamlined, you can be much more resilient and responsive to market context changes.
Thank you so much for answering some questions from our attendees and for sitting down with us today. It has been a pleasure. We're almost up on time here. So just a few last housekeeping items here. We will be following up this session with complimentary access to the Growth IQ video book for all attendees. So please look out for that email. Make sure to follow us, the Videobooks LinkedIn page, as well as Tiffani on LinkedIn for more advice and guidance on growth and sales. We'll always continuing to host these monthly fireside chats. Our next one is also focused on sales with Lisa Earl McLeod. Our next video book is going to be Selling with a Noble Purpose. If you're interested in learning about how video books for teams can ignite, engagement and micro learning for your organization, any learning and development or HR or sales leaders can trial the platform for free for them and their teams. And so if you go to litvideobooks.com and select Lit for Teams at the top of the website, you can learn more there. And so thanks again, everyone. Thank you, Tiffani, and hope you all have a great week and weekend ahead.
Thank you, everybody, for joining.